the trends that we've seen in therapy for the past couple of years now, that we are seen much less as medical professionals with our own autonomy and clinical judgment, and we're just workers. We're meant to be robots and go do this or don't do that. And we really haven't been getting the respect that we used to have once upon a time in this field.
Hey, healthcare providers, you're listening to the Burnout to Lit Up podcast. Hosted by myself, Erica, and my husband, Michael. We're an OTPT team that understands the healthcare industry's got some serious issues.
Inspired by our own experience with burnout, we've made it our mission and passion to help you navigate your career in healthcare by cultivating wellness, growing both personally and professionally, and advocating for a better workplace.
Whether you are a clinician or manager, new grad or seasoned vet, join us each week as we share interviews, research, stories, and strategies that will give you the tools to go from burnt out to your most lit up self.
Let's dive in.
Hey, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's Mike.
It's Erica, and if you're brand new, welcome, and if you are a long-time listener, welcome back. We are trying now.
We're hanging in there.
Yeah, we're hanging in there. We're just trying to keep our heads on. We're recording this really close to the release date of this episode because things are changing so quickly, and we are in a new place yet again. So hopefully we'll be here, not for too long, but
however long it takes.
Yeah, so we're at Mike's parents' house. So we have made it to our final destination. We were quarantining for 2 weeks in an Airbnb nearby after we made the decision to fly to Pennsylvania. Mike's he's a traveling physical therapist, and his contract ended. Our housing ended, so jobless, homeless, didn't know what to do, where to go.
Or how long we were going to be without work, because I'm primarily an outpatient physical therapist, so.
Right, so we came home, we quarantined ourselves, we did every safety precaution we could imagine to the extreme, and now we're staying with his parents, and we don't know how long we're going to be here. So we're taking it day by day.
Yeah, I feel good about being here. I feel like, safe, I guess. I don't have to worry about rent, and can kind of take the time to try to apply to jobs if they're even available. It's been pretty light though.
You've been applying to telehealth too, and
yeah.
How has that been?
Not great. I've applied to a couple and one of them even, got back to me and was like, yeah, we'd love to hire you in 1 to 2 months. I'm like, well, okay.
That's
thanks.
not helpful.
Not helpful, but.
Yeah. It's for rehab professionals, it's really messy time right now. And if you're familiar with Meredith Caston, she is a PT. She is founder of the Non-Clinical PT. Her and I have joined forces, and we have created an anonymous form to help rehab professionals right now, because during the last few weeks, even though I'm not working in clinical care, I've had a ton of anxiety and have absorbed so much anxiety from not just the frontline, physicians, nurses, respiratory therapists, but from the rehab professionals. But all the things that have been happening.
People asking for help and advice.
People not knowing what to do, if it's safe to treat or not, despite that. Despite what their clinic is doing, it seems unethical. So Meredith and I know that it's a hot mess right now. We have, as of today, over 400 replies. And we have this anonymous survey where you can share, are you a PT, PTA, OT, OTA, SLP, SLPA, etc. And you can share your story. Have you been forced to treat without PPE, or, what has all that look like for you? Because we're reading some astounding responses that give me chills, because it's so wrong what rehab professionals are having to do. And
yeah, if you have a story that you want to get out and you want to do it anonymously, this is the way to do that.
Yeah, because we're spearheading this kind of voice for rehab professionals, and we have some plans with what we're going to do with, all these anonymous responses. And we want to, share your story. And, there's not a lot of attention right now in Rehab Professionals. I get it, because the attention is going to those healthcare workers that are in the front lines, that are in dire need of PPE, that are dying, treating COVID patients. And, Rehab Professionals were getting lost, and we wanted to make sure that our stories count too, even though they're different. You are also being impacted by COVID. You are a healthcare worker, and what your clinic or what your organization, how they're providing you in this. I mean, not providing, how they're supporting you through this, or how they're not supporting you through this, is a part of the bigger healthcare picture that needs to be visible too.
Are you seeing more non-supportive replies to that Google form?
I haven't even gone through all the. I mean, it's like I said, there's over 400 answers, right. And I haven't really I have to talk to Meredith to see when we're gonna close this off, or how we're gonna move forward. But we need to sit down and really go through. But just from a glance,
yeah, we're gonna put the link to this thing in the show notes,
in the episode notes, yeah, because it's a really obscure Google form link, so you won't remember it. And
in the blog that we put up for each podcast episode on our website, so joyenergytime.com.
Yeah. But I've been observing, a lot of my club members, we have a wellness subscription for healthcare professionals, and a lot of my club members have been experiencing lots of changes, and they're, mainly nurses and other rehab professionals. So I can't even imagine, if that's just a small group of people, how the rest of the country is rest of rehab professionals are dealing with this. And, past 2 weeks have been really, really difficult for me. I haven't been, the last 2 nights ever since we moved to my ex-parents' house, it has helped me to feel even more grounded. I feel even more safe here. I feel like we made it, we're home. And
yeah, the anxiety has lifted a little bit.
Yeah, even when we were quarantining, I still had a little bit of anxiety, and I was falling asleep really late. I don't know how your sleep is with all of this. Even if you think you have anxiety, you're going through anxiety, or even if you think you may not be having anxiety, but you're still stressed, or you're having problems sleeping. I consider myself to be pretty mentally resilient, but for the past few weeks, I have been thrown out of whack. I've up, down, left, right. I feel like my mind has been all over the place, and I've had a lot of anxious-based thoughts that, trying to be uber supportive of my community, kind of not really caring about how I'm dealing with everything, just kind of making sure that my community feels supported. And so now that we moved here, I took a step back. I need to get back into writing my book. I need to get into healthy routines and focus on trying to go to sleep earlier. And so far it's been working, and taking care of my mental health. And it's just been a weird wave. We're on this weird place right now, so
it's weird. It's weird
okay
time.
To forgive yourself, and don't I was kind of judgmental of myself, and how I was coping, and how I was going to sleep so late, and I was having a lot of I would also wake up in the middle of the night and not be able to fall asleep, and I shouldn't be having this anxiety because I'm not the one in the front lines. I'm not the one going through a lot of hard stuff. But I saw something online too, just because you're not in the front lines, or just because whatever your position is, wherever you are right now, your anxiety is valid, your stress is valid. So be gentle with yourself. It's once you give yourself that self-compassion, and you acknowledge that you're judging yourself for how you're feeling, or you think you should or shouldn't be feeling a certain way, give yourself self-compassion. This is something that is...
It's okay to do nothing.
So you don't have to be productive during a pandemic.
I beat myself up sometimes about not doing something that's, working towards a goal of some kind. And, Erica had to tell me that, this is an okay time to occasionally be doing something that's, quote, unproductive. Or just reading a book for recreation, or
talk about the soul plant.
Oh yeah, so I dabbled in writing a little bit. So I've been kind of like writing some short stories and things. So that takes a little bit of my free time, and it's like really nice to have like a little project that I work on, and it's not always me working on Joy Energy Time or always looking for another PT job. So
yeah, and if you subscribe to our newsletter, and you're part of our online network, our Monday edition of the newsletter, our cheat sheet had water your soul plant ideas.
Yeah.
Because I just came up with that because Mike was in a funk. I don't know if this was last week or 2 weeks ago. Honestly, when we were quarantining,
don't remember.
All the days blurred in together. But it was like some point during our quarantine in the apartment, when Mike was in a funk, and I told him, and just like I'm going to tell you, like, you know, like, it's okay not to be productive all the time. It's okay to do something that doesn't have, you know, a direct, like, end product that's productive. Like, working on your creative book just for fun. Mm-hmm. For me, I'm going to start doing a puzzle, and I want to get into some art, you know, if we can actually get the supplies. But, like, regardless, you know, water your soul plant. Not everything has to be productive. Even the books I was reading, I only read like self-development, like personal growth, professional development books. So I started reading a novel yesterday. Even like a little switch like that. You know, I've been hearing a lot online about people finding joy in like really small things. So, you know, things that in our normal lives we would be too busy to do because it doesn't get to our bottom line. It doesn't, you know, help us to get more fit or to get smarter, but like do something just for yourself. Like, you have this time, you know, as unfortunate, you know, as it is, you have this time to reflect and work on things that feed and nurture your soul, because I feel like since there's so much uncertainty and stress, anything we can do to nurture our souls and our well-being is going to help us, even if it's really little things that we took for granted before. So yeah, I think that's my 2 cents. So we're gonna introduce our guest now, because this is an episode you don't want to miss.
Yeah, I was really pumped to hear about this, actually, because this is something that I've always wondered about. You know, we'll read her kind of introduction here in a second, but in a nutshell, it's a group of OTs, PTs, and is speech involved as well, or I'm actually not sure, but they are starting to get people organized with the goal of creating a union for rehab professionals, and all the great things that come from that. And that's, you know, I never understood why we couldn't be unionized or why we weren't unionized, with all the terrible stories you hear about how rehab professionals are treated, and about what they're being asked or forced to do. Mm-hmm. And, you know, even things like pay, you know, like we're so integral in a normal medical process or situation or someone's recovery, that we should have a lot of power if we're unionized. So, yeah, I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
Well, I'll take over.
Yeah. It's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially I think, you know, when we recorded this, also it was at the very beginning of the outbreak of COVID-19. So Stacy does mention it, so even more timely now, I think, to have this episode. But Stacy Gulick is a part of a group that started a wildly popular Facebook group called Rehab Therapists for a Union. Stacy is an occupational therapist, and along with her other colleagues, they created the American Therapy Alliance, whose vision is to become the prominent advocacy organization for therapists by empowering therapists to connect with unions and legal counsel, organize group communications with legislators, and lead efforts to set acceptable standards within the healthcare community. They also empower all therapists with the knowledge and ability to practice ethically.
Yeah, and this is sad because it's something that I feel like our national organizations should be helping us with, all those things that, like, it's like that this has, you know, goals to help make healthcare a better place for us all to work in. You know, things like the APTA and the AOTA and, you know, equivalent organizations, like that's their job that they have been, in my opinion, completely failing at doing. And it's sad that we have to get together on Facebook to try to make these things happen. And you'll hear about all, what they're trying to do, all the hoops and holes and things that they're trying to jump through. So
Juicy stuff.
It's been a hard kind of journey for them so far, but
yeah,
I'm glad someone's doing it.
So without further ado, let's get on to the show.
Please enjoy.
And please subscribe to
do some of the things.
The things we always talk about here. Subscribe, like, rate, review on iTunes. We appreciate it. Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey Stacy, welcome to the show. I'm happy to be talking to you today. How are you doing?
I am doing really well considering everything that's going on right now.
Yes. So right now at the time of this recording, there's been a lot of news about the coronavirus outbreaks. And yes, last night was the first night I actually got a real night's sleep. So it's been stressful for everyone, but I know we're hanging in there.
This is definitely a high anxiety time for a lot of people, and especially for those of us in healthcare who are kind of at the front lines of it.
Right. I feel like there's two ends of it for healthcare professionals. There's the end of it where you are at the front lines and you are working overtime and you are there. And then there's the other side of it where a lot of healthcare professionals are also being laid off and being sent home, especially therapists. So I'm seeing both of that, how just the spectrum is so wide.
Yes, very much so. And when it comes to the therapists, which is my specialty, I'm an occupational therapist and I represent American Therapy Alliance. We are seeing a lot of either the layoffs, the being sent home, some therapists even being told they can't use their PTO time to cover this. And then the other extreme where agencies are saying their therapists still have to go into homes, still have to conduct group sessions, believe it or not, and without proper PPE. So very different things that we're seeing, extremes.
Wow. Yeah, I actually saw something online just before we started this about, demanding for the CDC to provide more PPE. For healthcare professionals. And yeah, I, from my end, talking to people that are, being forced to choose, between PTO and, or not having that option, I'm not getting paid and losing out on that. And it's, these are people that are working with older adults that are already compromised. So I just don't know. There's a lot of gray lines here.
And unfortunately, it's really going along with the trends that we've seen in therapy for the past couple of years now, that we are seen much less as medical professionals with our own autonomy and clinical judgment, and we're just workers. We're meant to be robots and go do this or don't do that. And we really haven't been getting the respect that we used to have once upon a time in this field.
Right. And that's what we're going to talk a lot about today. And everything you do with your team and how you're making strides. And how about we take it back to the beginning of, your story, how you got to this place with the American Therapy Alliance and how that all came to be.
Sure. It actually started off on Facebook in a separate group that was for traveling therapists. All four of us, now admins, had gotten together on that group. We're all traveling therapists, or at least were at the time. And in travel therapy, we kind of get the short end of the stick first. We don't even have the protection of companies wanting to keep employees around and happy for long periods of time. We're completely disposable. So we were getting, contracts canceled for, without notice and all sorts of things. And we were really just chatting about, geez, if we had a union, there'd be somebody to stand up for us because our agencies we work through don't stand up for us. And we said, well, you know what? That's actually a great idea. I wonder if there are other therapists that feel the same way. So we started the Facebook group called Rehab Therapists for a Union. And it grew members really, really quickly, like phenomenal explosion of growth. It actually grew so fast that we got noticed by the New York Times. We got noticed by several other unions about how quickly we brought people together, because this was the first time that social media had been used to bring together and potentially organize workers.
Wow.
So happy to say we really only opened up the Facebook page in late August, early September, and we now have 28,000 members.
Wow, that's really impressive. Yeah, I remember like one of my old classmates, because he knows, like a lot of people I went to school with know that I'm doing this and I'm advocating for healthcare and burnout. And someone sent me your group, and I was like, oh, I want to check this out. And it was like in the fall, and it was like already like thousands of people. I'm like, whoa, this is so big. This is incredible. And so I wanted to ask, are you and the other admins, like I know you said that, well, you told me off air that you were a traveling therapist, but are your admins, the other admins, are they still currently like traveling therapists or perm?
We currently have one admin who thought she was going perm and was super excited for it, and we were all really happy for her, but has now found out that that position is not really there for her to have anymore. Another one of our admins is still trying to stick it out as a traveler, and then myself and another have unfortunately been looking at PRN, filling hours as we can, and changing careers, just because the therapy world is not stable. And that's a really sad, scary thing. When people think of, anything in healthcare, they usually think of it being really stable, paying really well.
Right.
But it's not the case anymore.
Yeah, that's why I entered healthcare. I remember my parents telling me, oh, that's such a safe, career. You'll always have a job. I remember that one. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I've always loved medicine and like loved human bodies when I was very young. So I was like, oh, healthcare is like, this is something that fits so naturally for me. But yes, times have changed. I don't know if you read this article, just came up in my head right now. This article a few months ago it was written by an anonymous OT. Do you know which one I'm talking about? About like how things have changed, like because of productivity and
yes. Mm-hmm. And actually I've seen quite a few articles along those same lines. It is definitely a common thread in the therapy community right now.
Mm-hmm.
That we're kind of seen more as widget workers and robots and not human beings and healthcare professionals.
Right. So where, how, based on your experience with, when you entered this career and how long you've been practicing and what you've seen, like what have you seen firsthand that progression from being valued, having autonomy, to the situation where we're at today?
Oh, absolutely. And when I tell new graduates about this, they can't even believe it. But once upon a time, facilities, especially SNFs and acute hospitals, would have us on staff just for our expertise. I've worked in acute setting once before where they would have no clients and they just needed us to sit there until X o'clock when our shift ended in case the ED needed us for anything. We were valued just for our expertise, and people wanted us around and in their facilities so that they could call upon that expertise. And it has, especially since the rug model came out, shifted to, you guys are the money makers of the department. And in the beginning, it wasn't so bad because we did kind of have that pull as the money makers of a lot of skilled nursing facilities. We were keeping them afloat. And so, they wanted to treat us nice and keep us around. And every place was trying to hire as many therapists as they could, because that's how you made the big bucks.
Mm-hmm.
And it went too far to where we were nothing but people with a pulse and a license getting minutes to make the facility more money. And a lot of that came into play when third-party therapy companies came into facilities and started, buying out the departments, taking over the departments. And it's turned from a health service that we used to offer into what just became, a revenue source. And once that happened, people stopped seeing us really as having value, mostly because it's not possible in today's therapy world, in most settings, for us to just stop what we're doing and go answer, a doctor's question or go consult with nursing about somebody, because every single minute of our day has to be billable for productivity. But it wasn't always like that. And we really need to get back to those roots.
Yeah, I've read some heartbreaking things about our, and I say our as like OTs, but so PTs and SLPs can relate that, our decision making, our clinical reasoning, that's significantly impacted by that. And, having to choose between what's billable and non-billable, and having that pressure is something that, like new grads, we don't, and I say I graduated like a long time ago, but, not that long ago, like, let's see, 6 or 7 years ago. And I entered the profession thinking, of looking at it as if I'm going to have all this autonomy and all these wonderful things, like OT is such a beautiful career and profession. Like once you actually get out in the working world, that's when I've spoken to, quite a few of my classmates, and every time I have these conversations with someone, whether it's a classmate or another OT, like burnout is always like there, whether it's like, oh, it happened to me recently or it happened to me a long time ago, or I think I'm experiencing burnout. Like I think everyone is affected by these larger changes that are trickling down and they're impacting our mental health. Have you experienced burnout?
Absolutely. And it's one of the reasons that I started getting into travel to begin with, because you would only have to put up with a place for the length of a contract. And if you were getting fed up with the administration or the caseload or whatever, you could just go on to the next place. It's funny that you even bring it up, because back when I was in school, we had a sociology assignment to research burnout for our intended profession. And all of us in occupational therapy program could not find anything to even support that our profession had burnout. And the professor couldn't believe it. He's like, no, you're not researching deep enough. Every profession has burnout. And we said, we're finding all of these studies that actually show that we don't have burnout. We're mental health experts, and, we have so many different career options that we can just switch to different settings, and we don't typically have people leave the field due to burnout. And oh my goodness, that has completely 180'd. OTs, PTs, speech therapists are burnt to a crisp, and we see that so much on our Facebook page. The members, don't feel even safe at work. They don't feel like they can bring problems to their supervisors. They don't know who to turn to. They feel like, they don't even have the law on their side, which on a side note, they do. But that's actually what the employers want. Unfortunately, we have a lot of unethical employers out there right now who want their employees to feel hopeless, which sounds horrible. Like, why would you want your employees burn out? They're going to leave. But these employers are hoping that the job market is so bad that therapists will be too scared to leave. And we tend to be helpers. And so our nature is to plug along and get through the muck and do what's best for our patients. And even if that means self-sacrifice. And unfortunately, we've done that way too long, and we need to start looking at our own needs as a profession and as individuals.
Yeah, and do you find that for especially OTs, because I'm in the process of writing my first book, and I have been doing a ton of research, like just to make sure everything is backed and evidence-based, and
I was reading about, and this is, I didn't have to read about it because I know it, our professional identity, especially as OTs, no one really knows what we do. We have a hard time, making ourselves known. Like I talked to one of my teachers about this, and she's like, we do a poor job at marketing ourselves. And I don't know, from your perspective, does the lack of professional identity, especially for OTs, does that add to this problem? Is it related?
It does add to the problem for OTs specifically. When we had the rollout of some with PDPM, but mostly with PDGM, a lot of home care agencies had to severely limit the number of visits that they were providing. And we mean had to, as in for their bottom line, not that they really should have been limiting visits at all. And so they would leave it up to nursing to decide what disciplines should come in. And some were even saying, well, you could have one motor discipline, but not both. So you can have PT or you can have OT. And of course, nobody knows what OT does. So they're like, well, PT is most important because, OT just does, buttons and stuff.
Yeah.
We don't know. So we've actually seen some home health agencies completely let their OTs go or put them all to PRN and give all of the ortho clients to PTs exclusively. So yeah, it does hurt us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a big problem that continues to be a problem. And, when you started, when you thought about with your admins, okay, like we have this idea, we want to create this Facebook group and we want to form a union. And I've seen, your whole process with the lawyers, and can you explain and expand upon what that process has been like to establish a union, and where are you at now with that?
Oh, goodness. It has flipped and flopped so many times. When we originally started the group, like I said earlier, it was really just to see were there other therapists that wanted this too. And once we realized there definitely was, and boy, was there a huge number, our first goal was to just try and get the numbers. We spoke with a couple of unions and union experts, and they all said, the power is in the numbers. You just have to get the majority of therapists. And when you're looking at all three disciplines, PT, OT, speech therapists, that's like over 100,000 members that you actually need to have the majority of everyone in those fields. So obviously that's a little bit of a bigger bite than we can do with just a Facebook page. So we started talking with lawyers to see what we would really need to do, what were the minimums, what kind of funds would we need to get this started. And at that time, they educated us on what was needed for a union. And then they also opened us up to the idea of becoming a social advocacy group. Part of the reason for that is that in the United States, the laws are really not made to be very supportive of workers and unions, and that there's certain limits depending on the different states on what unions can do. And since therapy is so complicated, it's not really just our relationships with our employers, but it's also the value that our government sees in what we do, because obviously Medicare and Medicaid rates are set by the government, and based on those, our employers can only pay us so much, etc. And unions typically don't, they do some lobbying for their members, but that is not their focus. Their focus is negotiating with employers. And we were also seeing from, at this point, the Facebook page was completely open forum and people could post whatever they wanted, and it was mass chaos most of the time. But what we did see from that was there was just so much fraud going on. We knew that we really needed to curtail that, and that was really kind of the, while we know we wanted a union, this was a bigger issue. We had to make sure that members were safe to practice before we could ever get to unionizing. So we started looking at the advocacy group angle. So we did propose that to our members and start fundraising for that. And unfortunately, a lot of naysayers were very vocal about not wanting to do that, wanting to just do a union. And that was on us. We've never done anything like this before. We're not organizers. We're just therapists. We really realized that we should have done a lot more communication as far as to the whys and how they were different and what each would do. So the members made it pretty clear that they wanted to go to union. So we've been exploring that. What would that mean and what would that look like if we didn't have the advocacy part of it and we just went union? Because originally we were trying to do them both. And so we have been in the talks with several unions, union organizers, union reps, obviously our legal team still, and seeing what the feasibility of that is, what the timeline for that is. Our lawyers told us originally that would be really a 10-year or more project. And we know that our profession can't wait that long. So we are now looking at how we can get our members unionized quickly and efficiently. And that might come as one big union. It might come as smaller unions. We do kind of have something in our back pocket at the moment that we are getting ready to roll out again, but we want to make sure all of our ducks are in a row first. We've learned from our last time. And so we're getting all the documentation together. We're trying to put together budgets, mission statements, vision statements, so that we can clearly communicate with our members what our next proposition is. And it really is about the members. If they don't like what we roll out next, well, we go back to the drawing board again and we see what else we can rework. And that is really what a union is all about. Unions are not about organizers coming in and dictating, this is how things are going to roll. Unions are the members in a place deciding what they want for themselves. Their own leadership that they vote in is one of them. So we're not trying to come in and tell people like, this is how it must be. We're trying to say, well, here's plan A. What do you guys think? You don't like that. All right, well, here's plan B. What do you like? Take it or leave it. Okay, you're going to leave it. All right, well, here's plan C. And we'll keep doing that until we get something because, well, we've already committed us admins to take this to the grave of our careers, which is already started to happen for some of us. We were warned by the lawyers in the beginning that we would have great big targets on our backs by being the organizers. And we accepted that and we decided to proceed anyway. So failure is not an option for us right now. So I guess that's where the group stands, is that we'll be rolling out our new proposal to the group members. We actually wanted to do it like right now, but with all the COVID stuff that's going on, this is not the time for members to have one more thing to discuss and consider. Our primary focus right now is keeping our members alive and safe and making sure they have PPE. So once people settle into their new routines with all this going on, we will be rolling that out and seeing what our membership thinks of it.
Oh, wow.
So that's very exciting.
Yeah, I'm really excited. And when you said 10-year process, I'm like, wow. I mean, yeah, and you're right. We don't have that luxury of time on our side. Like, I mean, as of, trying to act, that could be like, and I remember, I don't know, it was someone in your team, it could have been you saying, that's an end goal, but for the meantime, let's try to do something, right?
Correct. We realize that we have to keep our profession going and alive long enough to reach our, glorious utopian goals. There's just disagreement among the members about what's the best course of action to get there. And that's fine. We love a good discussion because frankly, this has never been done before. And that's what the lawyers and the union organizers and all them keep telling us, like, this has never been done before. And of course, when we speak with the big trade organizations, they tell us it can't be done. Well, that's not acceptable to us. Of course it can. And we're going to make sure it can. And so that means we have to be a little bit creative. So we have been researching, and we think we have another plan that the membership will get really excited about for kind of getting everything that we need quickly so that we can continue towards our utopia of just being able to work as professionals with our own clinical judgment and our own decision making. and keep our
Yes.
jobs.
And be respected.
Yeah, it sounds like a crazy utopia, but that's all we want. It's a pretty low bar.
Yeah, I know. Tell me about it. Wow. So, you mentioned fraud and a lot of the members experiencing fraud and what can be done right now because man, oh man, I mean, I'm not going to go into my story now, but and my listeners, if they've been listening for a while, they know it. How my burnout was largely due to being forced to engage in fraudulent activities, but it being portrayed as being a team player, So, the members in your, in your Facebook group, and if they're experiencing fraud, and you mentioned that's something that like needs to be taken care of now because it jeopardizes our safety and even our license and all that. Like, what can be done?
Absolutely, that is not unique. We hear those kind of stories all the time. If you're not willing to say this in your note, or put it under that date, or sign off on this, then you're not a team player, and we'll get somebody else in here who is willing to do it. So it really depends on what the issue is. But if we're talking about Medicare billing fraud, then we are recommending to our members that they keep very detailed notes. And if there is a way that they can use their private email to send themselves a private email so that it's time and date stamped with details about who they were spoke to, what was said, what was, the exact quotes that were used. Obviously, if there are any signs posted at work or emails from management, save those, get pictures of them. Because it really will in this situation come down to he said, she said. And if you have the documentation, then you are the one that's going to be believed. And they're the ones that have lawyers and stuff. So you really need that record. And then you need to take it to CMS or DOJ. And we do have links on our Facebook group and our website on how to do that. But really Google either one of them. If you report to CMS, they will turn it over to DOJ also, or you can go right to DOJ. But that's really the only way we're going to stop these companies, is there has to be a negative consequence for them doing what they're doing. And for so long, there hasn't been. Maybe the only negative consequence was, a therapist like yourself or myself who was like, no, that's immoral and I'm not doing it and this job isn't worth it, and they walk out the door. Well, okay, well, they just bring somebody else in. We really kind of need to hit them in the pocketbook. American Therapy Alliance, we also have in our game plan some possibilities with our legal team for bringing a bunch of therapists together who have experienced fraud at some of these larger therapy companies and perhaps hurting their pocketbook quite a bit. So more to come with that. Obviously, with anything legal, we can't talk too much about things in advance, but that's definitely something we want to see happen in the near future, is to make these companies aware, whether it's one, whether it's half a dozen, whatever, they need to have a negative consequence. And for right now, as individual therapists, what they can do is take great notes and report these people to CMC. If it's not a Medicare fraud, especially with COVID-19 going on right now, if it's a workplace safety issue, then they really need to contact their county health departments. If they work at a federal or state facility that's not monitored by the county health, then they need to go right to CDC. And we have that information on our Facebook group as well on how to do that. But yeah, it's about report. We've been quiet in the name of being a team player for way too long.
Amen. Honestly, yeah, it's I think so many of us, especially rehab professionals, we have, such big hearts and we don't want to overstep our boundaries. And, personally, I'm a people pleaser. So, going against the grain when everyone is like, yeah, this is how we do things, and you're like, well, but this is fraud. You feel like you question yourself, but you have to trust your gut and take the proper action. And if let's say nothing was done, let's say you and your team didn't get together and form this and no one else did, how do you see our profession deteriorating if nothing were to happen? Because we're already on the downhill, with not being respected, not having autonomy, being treated as, just a person with a pulse coming in, and that is widely felt by so many. So like, what would happen if nothing happened?
Well, we do have record of about 10 years ago, somebody else trying to do this and bring therapists together to unionize, or at least to use our group strength to make some changes. And they unfortunately did not get very well supported by the other therapists. The therapists want change, but especially back then, they didn't want to offer the time support, the financial support, the social support for making that happen. And so that's exactly why things are as bad right now as they are, is because 10 years ago, when somebody tried to make changes and get a movement going, the movement died. And so if this movement dies and American Therapy Alliance does not really come to fruition and we don't get to complete our mission, then we're just going to see further deterioration of the therapy professions. And we are already like really on the cusp of seeing that. We have a lot of occupational therapy assistants that have come to me, physical therapy assistants that have messaged and said, they're interviewing for jobs or they're seeing job postings for $10 an hour.
What?
I make more doing PRN home health work, making dinners and feeding clients than these skilled, educated professionals are being offered right now in the marketplace. And that's what we're going to continue to see if we don't stand up and demand change.
So, I don't know personally how everyone's student debt looks like, but my student debt is astronomical, and that's something also that I have heard other people, other OTs and PTs, if someone asks them, oh, should I enter the field, they'll tell them no, because it's not worth it right now, which is from a financial standpoint, like the debt you accrue, or I can't never say that word right, accrue, well it's not equivalent to our salary. Like, it's just not worth it. And is that another component in this, or is that totally unrelated to how in playing a role in how we we're not respected as individuals in the field, but also as a profession, because we keep making the price tag, not we, but like the price tag just keeps getting higher, and it's just not paying out properly.
Yeah, the education system for therapists is a huge part of the problem. And a large portion of that is that when there was a shortage of therapists, so many of these schools popped up, these programs opened, and now they're dependent on keeping their classrooms full in order to keep their doors open and their staff paid. So a lot of the data that they're using to entice new students into this profession is old or inaccurate. When I went to school, I was told, you'll be making, $80,000 a year, no problem. And this was, back when I graduated. Well, I haven't seen that ever. No, I take that back. I did see close to that for 6 months when I worked for a really unethical sniff. And then, of course, I walked out. So that's the only time I've seen that kind of money. That they told me in school was everywhere. Like, that was the standard salary. Even when I go and look at the websites, the glassceiling.coms and all that, or the salary.coms, they're not accurate because they don't break down all the different areas of therapy. There's a huge gap right now. Especially between different disciplines and between different settings, and none of these schools or anything take that into account. The other thing that they don't take into account is that by virtue of having all of these programs and fighting so hard with less than accurate information to get students in the door, is that the marketplaces have become completely flooded. And so what happens when you completely flood the marketplace? Salaries go down. So the schools kind of did it to themselves, just by virtue of not really self-regulating how many people they were going to graduate a year into these fields. And so that's a huge problem, because then that has led the employers to where once we were rare, once we were hard to find, they wanted to do everything they could to keep us happy and keep us there. Now there's a line out the door of therapists needing a job. So they know that if we won't play ball the way they want us to, that they'll just grab the next person in line, and somebody in that line is going to be willing to do what's illegal, unethical, whatever, in order to, feed their family, which we can't really fault the therapists for that when they're coerced into behavior that they don't necessarily know is unethical. And we're seeing that a lot too, where a lot of places are looking for the younger therapists, for the new graduates, because they're actually hoping that the new graduates are not aware as much of what their rights are, what the laws are, and that they're just going to take the DOR's word for, well, this is how it's supposed to be done. Oh, okay. And I've at one of my very recent assignments, I actually got chewed out by the director of rehab. She said I was personally attacking her by telling their new hire all the bad stuff. And I was like, I'm telling the new hire what the law is. So they terminated me early. And that's the consequence. And that's why a lot of people, they know they're going to find someone in that line, especially when the line's so long.
Everybody's replaceable. That's I used to watch a lot of Dance Moms.
Ouch.
Abby Lee Miller would tell her dancers, everybody's replaceable.
I'll get my bow on.
Yeah, your big bow, dance shoes. Oh my gosh. Anyway, yeah, I mean, it's true, and it's so sad because it's kind of like predatory, I feel.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, I've had I used to be an adjunct, and now those students have graduated, and I had a few of them reach out to me, and kind of panicked because of things going on, and they're like, is this okay? Should this be happening? And you're right, we're new. I mean, I'm speaking on the behalf of new grads, they're new, and so they haven't had that quote unquote real world experience, and employers are taking advantage of that and hoping to, this is what I heard or overheard in one of the places where the job where I had that unfortunate fraud experience, but they wanted to mold me. I was newer still. It wasn't my first job, but I was newer, and that freaks me out.
The old mold you line.
Yeah.
Which means we're going to turn you into someone who can walk the line between ethical and unethical, and maybe dip in without alerting CMS to something wrong. Yeah, it's a scary world.
It is. Yeah. And as we wrap up, I want to ask you, you mentioned this utopia, which, and I like how you say, setting the bar low, because we just want to be respected and have that autonomy. But in an ideal world for rehab professionals with all the right pieces in place, what would that actually look like?
In that world, our employers would recognize our value as more than a pulse and a degree. And they would want us in facilities for our expertise. And our coworkers in other disciplines would know what our expertise is and seek us out for that. So education about what it is we do, and not just OT, that's been an OT battle forever, but for all the rehab professionals. We're very often pigeonholed. So our utopia would not be having us so pigeonholed, and really using us to our full potential as professions, and paying us accordingly for that expertise. And, that sounds kind of selfish, but really that means that now our clients are going to have the best outcomes because they get to get all the benefit that we can offer them.
Mm-hmm. And would you say that moving away from billable productivity as solely looking at billable units, would that also help?
I believe in part it could. And I think that's what the PDPM changes were hoping to do by disabling rehab as the income generating source of the facility. I think they were hoping to take the effort, the emphasis away from the minutes and put it just back on, give them the therapy that they need, however they need it. So that we would be a little bit more freed up to do the things that are non-billable, but still bring value. And unfortunately, I think they misunderstood the level of corruption and greed that has proliferated our professions, and that the companies were just going to condense our billable hours and send us home rather than having us still there for an 8-hour shift and using us in other avenues. So their heart was in the right place, but like most lawmakers and legal decisions, it fell a little short.
Right. So, there are a few key components, ingredients to make this recipe of having this utopia where we can show up in the way we were supposed to, the way we were taught we would show up in the world. And you guys are bridging that gap. So that's so important. And I'm so grateful for you guys and the establishment of the American Therapy Alliance, just as I know thousands of people are as well. So where can people find you and your group and connect with you?
Our website is americantherapyalliance.org. They can find all of our weekly updates there. And of course, we are on all sorts of social media. You can find us on Facebook at American Therapy Alliance. We are also on Twitter and Instagram as well. So whatever your favorite social media, look us up. We're there.
Awesome, Stacy. Well, thank you for coming on the show and sharing your experiences and your take on all this, because I truly appreciate it. I know so many people have also this appreciation for what you and your team are doing. So before I let you go, I like to always ask this of my guests: what makes you your most lit up self?
My most lit up self is when I get to be an advocate. I used to be advocating for my patients, and now it's advocating for my peers. I love it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.